I saw a quote. I think it was today, and we both know this. It was healing is a general unraveling.
Yeah.
That's really what we spent the last 2 seasons doing, was unraveling.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, and I'm learning and I'm ready to share and talk about it. So
Let's do it.
I know that we've talked recently about the topic of just like parenting and reparenting. I've been doing a lot of like healing with that as well and envisioning myself being a mom, and also had the privilege while we were out traveling, got to spend some quality time and like with you being a mom and
Gosh.
wit- witnessing you do that in Nashville when you all came out. And so I kind of want to talk about that if you're cool with it.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because I had the best time learning more about Aubrey, who is such a mini version of you. But when we would often talk, you would tell me often that like you reflect on your childhood a lot when you are faced with situations with Aubrey and Mira and all your kids. And so tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean when you say that you kind of feel like you're reparenting yourself?
The modern woman knows how powerful she is and creates her world with passion.
She's intentional about how she leads her life, who she supports, and who she brings around her.
She's not afraid to dream big. She defines success for herself and pursues what's on her heart.
Even when we don't have all the answers. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and honestly, that trip to Nashville that we took with Aubrey started a lot of the focus on what I've been sharing with you recently, which kind of spurred this conversation. So yes, I have 3 kids, Draven, Mira, and Aubrey. They are all absolutely incredible in their own way, and I'm obsessed with them. I always knew I wanted to be a mom, but I realized 2 things once I actually became a mom. The first thing was that my mom actually did a great job. Like, I thought I knew best when I was little. I was like that little bossy kid that was like, I know best, and this is how you do things. And honestly, Aubrey's kind of like that. I'll share more in a second. I knew that my mom was right about more things than I thought. And secondly, I also knew that there was a whole other world of parenting that I had no idea about. And I realized that through literally just trying, like just being a parent. And once, especially Aubrey, she's 7 now, got old enough to really, her personality started to show and she started to be more assertive. And kids when they're young, it's just different. Like you know, for anybody who's a parent, you just navigate the day to day and kind of go along with their tantrums and their needs. And you're basically like just caretaking all the time. But once they get older and they have like thoughts and feelings and different things they're sharing, it just takes it up a level. So Aubrey is in a stage right now, she's 7, where she's got some really strong opinions, really strong thoughts. She's, really focusing on who she's becoming as a person, which is really cool to see. But there's a lot of big feelings that come along with that. And again, she's bossy like I was. And that's one of the reasons why I see myself in her so much. When I think about how I was raised and just the situations and just the beautiful way that I came into this world at that time. And again, this is from the perspective of a kid, right? Like at 7, I was 7, and this is how I'm becoming at 7. So when I came to the world at 7, and I think about my 7-year-old now, I'm like, okay, like I can do this differently. Not that there was anything wrong with me at 7, but I'm like, okay, what have I learned in my life to bring Aubrey, Mira, Draven up differently? Because I have spent so much time through all of my work unraveling and in like human design, just like unlearning what society taught me how they taught me how to be. No fault of anybody, but it's just what happens. I've unlearned so many things that aren't necessarily for me and relearned or just like uncovered the way that I am really meant to operate in this world. And so when I think about raising Aubrey differently and Mira and Dre, like, okay, how can I raise them in a way that supports who they really are and not just like what's expected of them, and not just behavior modification and helping them just be good so that I can get through the day without having too many interruptions. I just think about that difference. And so when I think about reparenting's for me. So I didn't necessarily go out and like learn or read a book on like how to parent that way, right? That was not natural to me. So I'm like just like figuring out how to be a parent because I've never done it before, right? And
Sure.
the way I was parented wasn't really like that. It was different. And so when I think about reparenting, I'm like really just learning this for the first time on how to be a parent to not only them, but also like, okay, how do I deal with these situations myself? And it seems really complex. Maybe I'm over explaining it, but, when I saw Aubrey, she got really tired really fast on that trip. I move at a much faster pace than she does, which totally makes sense. I'm an adult. She got real tired. And so her, inner, just her inner, I want to do my own thing came out. I was like, no, like we're moving at this pace. Let's go. I was like, okay, this is a trigger. I need to step back and reevaluate this a little bit. So I started diving in even more so and leaning into, okay, because her behavior is just a symptom of something much more. So I was like, okay, what is at the heart and the root of all this? And that's where I dove in and started going into like a deep dive with you.
Yeah.
And started sharing more about that with you. And so that's really what I've been focused on here recently, for sure.
Well, I think it's really incredible that you're even taking the time to, like, the way that you are approaching parenthood is so unique to me. I feel like it's also unique to the world, and the awareness that you have is really astounding and inspiring. And I'm wondering, like, is that something that you've just always innately had, or how did you bring yourself to have such like self-awareness first to even recognize, like, hey, instead of me just continuing on, like, the easiest thing is to be like, Aubrey, let's go, like, this is the pace we're going at, keep up, or like, you know, and that's okay. And if you need to do that, like, that is okay. But what's beautiful is the ability to, in the midst of that, recognize, like, okay, this is a trigger because this might have been an expectation for me when I was a child. And it didn't really set me up for success as I had hoped it would. Um, and recognizing that, if you don't mind talking a little bit more about how you brought awareness to that in the first place and how you're able to do that in the future too. Like when things come up, how are you able to like stop, think, process, and move forward in that way?
That is such a good question. Now I'm like, oh, you think I'm so aware and I don't even know how I started that. So I'm not. Wait, am I that aware? No, I'm just kidding. Just joking. So, okay. One thing that's really important to me, a value of mine, is connection, is good relationships, especially in my family.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the relationships that I want to have with my kids when they're older, I think like obviously I want them to feel like they can call me for things and they want to hang out with me and spend time, doing things together. So if I want that in the future, why wouldn't I want that now? And I do.
Mhm.
So I've done my fair share. Like I'm not a perfect parent. I've done my fair share of shuffling them along, and that usually did not end how I thought it could end. I was like, oh yeah, they'll just like hurry up, right? No, like especially Aubrey has just a mind of her own, which I love and value, and I'm so thankful for. I'm just so thankful that she won't let me just shuffle her along, right? She's like, no, like I'm going on,
Totally.
like, this is me. Like, you need to slow down. Like, you're making me mad, mom. Like, so the connection was suffering because I was
Mhm.
doing my thing and she was like, no. And there was no, like, just like any relationship, there was just no like meet in the middle type thing. And I'm not saying like when you're parenting differently, kids need to rule the world. Like, that's not what I'm saying it, but I, I realized, okay, if a connection is a value of mine and I'm trying to get them to do things without really focusing on the connection, I'm focusing on behavior modification. Maybe I should take a step back.
Yeah.
And really like, okay, what would be an action or a way to approach this that's in congruence with my value of connection?
Yeah.
And so, and also like, if I want to feel really connected with like my husband, with like my friends, with you, with work, like I got to start in my family, in my own house.
Sure.
This is like
Yeah.
basic stuff, but it's okay. So I'm like, I prioritize connection. I slow down and I'm like, okay, I don't even know how to do this. Like, okay, like at first it was me, trying to get on their level, especially Aubrey, and just be like, let me like baby you a little bit. And so I kind of have an over nurturing way about me, and like I can totally overdo that. And the happy medium, I think I'm learning, is like discipline and connection. So
Yeah.
boundaries are what make that work. And so I did pick up some books on that and have just been like reading and figuring out what feels right, human design for me. So that in those moments where connection could potentially be at risk, or it
Mhm.
already has been at risk, I can figure out how to approach those better and repair them better, because again, a lot of repairing needs to happen. But I, yeah, it's not easy because it's like completely relearning how I operate.
Sure. Well, and you said too, it's like if I want connection, if I want all these things with my friends, my colleagues, my families, it starts with my family.
Right.
But to your point too, it also starts with you. And that's what I feel like you've been so good at doing, is starting with yourself. Like instead of pointing the finger or looking outward, I feel like it's just really admirable to see you go inward too, which is what we've talked about multiple times. But on other topics, it's a lot harder to do that when you're parenting your child. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, well, they're just da 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 da.
Right.
And you're so good at just being like, well, wait a minute. Okay, what does this have to do with me? And I feel like that's a huge part of connection and that radical like ownership of your life that we've talked about in the past as well.
That's
Um, One other thing that I noticed when we were in Nashville was totally developmentally appropriate behavior. There was something that came up. I don't even remember what it was, but Aubrey was really upset. Like, it was not exactly what she wanted to do. And she was bummed. She wanted to do the opposite. And the way you handled it was insane. I mean, so like we start getting upset. You're Aubrey. Picture this. We're in our Airbnb. She's like, I don't want to do that. This is the worst. Da, da, da. And you go from like, well, you didn't even, yeah, your response was play. Like you literally acted like a kid and were like, let's try this. And she just like looked at you like she was expecting something totally different. Like she was expecting you to be like fight with her. And she just like, it was fun just watching from the outside because I was just like, yeah, like whatever, we're good, we're good. Like Jordan and I were like, we don't care. Whatever is best. The way that you handled it was through playing with her and like turning her like current mood into joy.
oh,
Why? How? Like I I know I'm just like I think that's a beautiful thing. And again, I think it goes into your ability to be able to really be quick on your feet. Um, which I feel like is a gift of yours, is just like being present, like fully present and intentional in the moment. A lot of times, like for me, that's something where I oftentimes like will think back and think of something like, "Ah, I could have handled that better later on," but you're still good in the moment. And that was one of those examples of how you didn't take it personally. You didn't take it like, you were like playful about it. And then in 2 minutes, that current, like whatever was bothering her in that moment, no longer was bothering her. And instead, we were all playing. Tell me about that. Like, tell me about, is that something that you've always done? Is that how you were parented? How did you get there? Like, if I'm a parent and I'm wanting to adopt that same mentality on conflict resolution with my child, how do I start?
Oh my goodness. Well, first, it's such a gift that it's such a gift to have someone so dear to you watch you parent your kids and then give you feedback on it. Because honestly, the only people who really watch me are like related to me, and they're,
Sure.
they have really high expectations of me. And let's just say this, I don't meet them.
You exceed them.
See, gift. So thank you for that. Choked me up a little. I was not always that way. So I'm naturally like, okay, I've actually learned two things. I am naturally a very playful person.
Hmm.
I learned to be so freaking responsible and so serious and like
Yeah.
in life. And I think a lot of adults are that way, to be honest. And I honestly think that I've been trying to be the more of, as I've been unlearning, I've learned that being playful is just a more fun way to go about life. Like it just is. And you know what, who taught me that? I think mostly I've had a lot of mentors. But Rudy, my husband, he's like the most playful person I've ever met, sometimes to a fault. and and he and I have been parenting together for quite some time. And one of the things that I learned early on with Aubrey, watching him with her, was to be playful, and that she responded much better to him being like, I'll race you to the top of the stairs, when I'm like, we need to take a shower. It's time to take a shower. Go get in the shower or else you won't be able to blah, blah, blah. Like, no, Jacqueline, time out. And he's like, hey, I'll race you up the stairs. First, last one upstairs is a rock and egg. Like, we still play that game.
Yeah.
Like all the time. And that is just an example. But I learned that works way better. And I'm sure it's in some parenting book that I read at some point.
Sure.
But as I started experimenting with it, I realized, okay, my true nature is play, her true nature is play. We connect on play.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Mira, same thing with Dre. Now they're a little older and they think I'm crazy, and that's fine. But it's way more fun than me being like, do this thing. I'm like, no, like, let's make it fun. And so if I'm doing that with her, I honestly have been doing that with myself as well. So thanks for noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought that was really admirable. And I feel like it does need to be added in a whole lot more. And I think it just makes you like enjoy the moment too.
Totally.
And it basically rewires the situation. Like I think if I remember correctly, I think it was just bedtime. I think she didn't want to go to bed.
Makes sense.
She wanted to hang out with us, but it was time for her bed. And so it was just like, let's make bedtime fun. And you did. And then it was just like the whole experience was more positive too. And I feel like it's less like grueling on you too, and less energy draining. It's like, okay, what can I do that's like turns this around?
Yeah. Or play.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Play.
thanks for noticing that. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but it works way better than me trying to control her, which is like
Yeah.
not a good
Yeah.
thing.
Sure. So, I mean, having the experience that you do, what would you say would be what would be the best parenting advice you would give, and what would be the worst parenting advice that you have heard?
Oh gosh. Okay. So two things on best parenting advice. This may be out there, but I really like the human design system for a lot of things, and parenting is one of them. So one of the things
Yeah.
I did was pulled all my kids' human design charts, and pretty much the reason why I learned how to read them at such a deep level that I did, because I wanted to be able to know how to support my family better.
Yeah.
So Rudy and my charts were the ones that I like practice on first, and then ventured out to theirs. And it's just helped me know them so much better, helps me understand them more individually, what their needs are, what their wants are, how to approach them differently. I'm not saying that everybody needs to like know how to do all the things. Like there are apps out there that can read them for you and give you all that advice, but it's incredible. It's an incredible way to like know your child as an individual, and
Yeah.
connect them differently and support them differently throughout different stages of their life too, not just when they're kids. So I don't know if that's parenting advice, but it really helps me know them better.
Yeah.
Especially like, kids only know themselves as much as they know themselves. They're kids. And I think that's
Right.
the other thing, is like connecting with them and where they are. And yeah, I have high expectations of everything in my life. That's just what, high performance is. But like who they are today is enough. And what they're doing now is so interesting and so important. And what I'm saying is like being obsessed with who they are today in a really healthy way is gold. If you do nothing else,
Yeah.
it's like being interested in them and like loving them
Right.
who they are.
Well, and what I hear you say too is that you're guiding them in life to be themselves, like the best version of themselves, versus something that you think they should be. And that's amazing, Jacqueline. Like they are so lucky to have you. But I just wanted to say that. That's what correct me if I'm wrong, but like from what you said, like what I
You
hear
are.
you saying
Yeah.
is that you through human design, you're able to get to know their unique selves, and then you're able to help guide them because they're all so uniquely different. So you're able to help them in different ways and what makes sense for them to be the best version of themselves, rather than something that you think they should be or society thinks that they should be. That's amazing.
Yeah, I guess, you said it perfectly. And I think some people might think like why are you so worried about like becoming the truest version of yourself? And why is that such a big deal? And why does it matter? And because it's a filter on everything you do, and everything how you do anything is more important than what you actually do.
Mhm.
What's the intention behind it? Why are you acting the way you are? We haven't been alive that long on this planet. There's some wise sages out there. But I remember at the ripe old age of 26, I was sitting at my desk and I was like, this is not fulfilling. This is not what I wanted.
Mhm.
This is not the thing. This is not it. Even though on paper it looks great and I followed the directions of the world. But who am I really is the question that I was trying to answer ever since that moment. And I've answered it, and it's going to keep changing,
Yeah.
which I learned, which is interesting. So I'd say, follow up with that. Some of the worst parenting advice. I don't know if this is fluffy, but just like one, not being interested in them
Mm.
and kids. And because they feel as important as you help them feel. Like that's going to
Yeah.
stay with them until they throw a wrench in that pattern too. Like that's just going to stay
Sure.
with them. That'll always stay with them underlying. And so I think the other thing too is trying to put them in a box, and I mean like carve. I totally think like helping them, instilling values in them, paving a path of like excellence alongside them is so important. Like those values are so important. Yes, my kids, I want them to make good grades. Like I think that's important because
Mhm.
that like discipline and like having excellence now gives you so much freedom now and later in life. But what they choose to do with that, I don't know. I'm more than happy to help them figure that out, but I'm never going to dictate what that needs to look like. So I don't know, that might sound too like high level, but I think being interested in them and who they are today is so important, because that connection, they will just build such a strong base and such a strong foundation from, that'll help them like feel invincible and they can do anything. And that's one thing that my mom always told me. It's like, you can do absolutely anything. And I believed her because she kept telling me that. And now I really think that is why my confidence is so high. Because confidence is really just like the belief that you can figure absolutely anything out. And so,
Totally.
yeah, I would say those things.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the first few years of our life, we look to our parents to help develop the inner voice that we lean on later in life. Like what we hear as kids is what we'll eventually tell ourselves as adults. And so I think that's amazing to be able to, instill that inner voice of you can do anything versus an inner critic of
Right.
these are expectations that you need to meet. So you're amazing. This topic was amazing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. If there's anything else that you want to share related to parenting, reparenting, you growing up, is there anything that you feel like you didn't like get to cover or share?
I think this just came to me, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I think that not everybody, but a lot of people blame their childhood for like their life.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this totally can be a real thing. Like, not going to discount that at all.
Sure.
And also, you can rewrite your past at any moment. And I'm not saying like I came from like a really hard past, like, no, it's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is no matter what the story is from your child self, you have the opportunity and the ability to truly rewrite it. And that's, I think, what reparenting really is. And it's so interesting. And this probably applies to a lot of people too. My inner child, I mean, just literally by having conversations with her, telling her, hey, what you experienced as your like little 5-year-old self, it was a big deal to you back then. Like, you fell and hurt your knee on the playground, like, and nobody came to help you right away. Like, from a child, that's a big deal, right? So like, even rewriting little things like that, like say memories that are on loop in your head and it's in the past, you have the ability to rewrite those now as an adult. And that might sound kind of weird, but anybody who's done it knows how powerful it is. So when I go back and I talk to you and I imagine my inner child, she looks a lot like Aubrey. And so sometimes it does get emotional for me when I think about like, okay, like you are literally me 30 years ago, not 30 years ago. I'm not that old, but I did math. You know what I mean? And so it's just really interesting, like going back and rewriting the past for any school situation. I feel like for myself while raising a family is, so many people are in that situation. And so I feel you, and it's possible, and you're not alone. You're not the only one doing it.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the thing.
Yeah, that's amazing and incredible. And thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with me.
Thanks for being in. Thank you for listening to the Modern Woman Show, where we are becoming our truest selves. We'd love to hear your parenting stories. Please share them with us by emailing us at themodernwomanshow@gmail.com. Thank you.